The quiz was on poisons, the human asked. Deadly, painful, or untraceable? The examination hall stretched before Day One like a cathedral of knowledge, its curved walls lined with viewing screens that displayed molecular structures from 1,000 worlds. He sat at his designated station, hands resting calmly on the smooth surface of his desk, while around him dozens of alien students fidgeted with nervousness. The air hummed with tension as Professor Velthar entered the room, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and specimen containers. Professor Velthar was a Quillian, a species that resembled enormous porcupines if porcupines had evolved intelligence and learned to wear academic robes. His quills rippled with colors that Day One had learned to interpret over the semester. Right now, they showed calm professionalism mixed with the sharp yellow of anticipation. The professor had taught toxicology for 300 years, and this final examination was his pride. "Students!" Velthar's voice resonated through the hall's acoustic system. "Today, you will demonstrate your mastery of xenotoxicology. I will present scenarios. You will identify compounds, suggest treatments, and explain your reasoning. This is not merely academic exercise. In the field, your knowledge will save lives or fail to save them. There is no middle ground in toxicology." Daewon noticed Hyunwoo sitting 3 rows ahead, another human student who had become his friend during late-night study sessions. Beside Hyunwoo sat Jiwon, a human female with remarkable talent for pattern recognition. The 3 humans in the class had unconsciously gravitated toward each other, finding comfort in familiar company among the bizarre variety of alien anatomies that filled the academy. The first few students performed adequately. A Threnny, whose gelatinous body pulsed with bioluminescence, correctly identified a paralytic agent from the Andromeda sector. A crystalline core student analyzed a heavy metal compound with mathematical precision. Professor Velthar's quills showed approval, shifting through pleased purples and satisfied blues. Then came Daewon's turn. Professor Velthar's eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the human. "Student Daewon, your scenario is complex. A diplomatic situation has arisen. A target individual must be neutralized without causing political incident. You have access to the full compound database. The target is a Vrelian dignitary. Biological specifications are standard for the species. How would you proceed?" The room went quiet. This was an unusual question, more practical than theoretical. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, chairs, or hovering platforms depending on their anatomy. Daewon leaned forward slightly. His expression remained neutral as he asked, "Deadly, painful, or untraceable?" The silence that followed was profound. Professor Velthar's quills went completely still, frozen in whatever color they had been displaying. Around the room, alien students turned to stare at Daewon with whatever sensory organs they possessed. Hyunwoo closed his eyes briefly, recognizing what was about to happen. Jiwon maintained her composure, but her jaw tightened. Excuse me?" Professor Velthar's voice had lost its usual confidence. "The requirements determine the approach," Daewon explained calmly, as if discussing crop irrigation techniques. "If the goal is immediate termination with political statement, that's deadly. If the goal is extraction of information or punishment, that's painful. If the goal is to avoid attribution or maintain plausible deniability, that's untraceable. Each requirement calls for different compounds and delivery methods. So which parameters apply to this scenario?" Professor Velthar's quills shifted to colors Daewon had never seen before, a mixture of alarm orange and disturbed gray. Let us say untraceable, for the sake of the exercise." Daewon nodded and began his analysis. "For Vrelian physiology with untraceable as primary parameter, I would recommend a 3-compound approach. First, a derivative of tetrodotoxin, which occurs naturally in Earth's pufferfish. Vrelians metabolize this slowly, creating a delayed onset of 12 to 15 hours. This establishes temporal distance from administration. Second, a synthetic modification of batrachotoxin, naturally occurring in certain earth frogs, to ensure cardiac involvement that mimics natural failure. Third, a trace amount of digitalis glycoside to confuse any standard toxicology screening, as it suggests pre-existing heart condition rather than external agent. He continued without pause. Delivery method matters. Dermal absorption is unreliable with Vrelian skin density, so I would recommend aerosol delivery in a confined space or introduction through the Vrelian equivalent of tear ducts, which have faster mucous membrane absorption. Alternatively, if the target consumes the fermented beverage common to their culture, dissolution in liquid provides reliable delivery with taste masking. The examination hall had become so quiet that Day-Wan could hear the ventilation system cycling air through the environmental controls. He looked up from his theoretical calculations to find every being in the room staring at him with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. The beauty of this approach, Day-Wan concluded, is that each component can be explained by natural causes if discovered in isolation, but the combination creates cascading system failure. The temporal delay allows the administrator to establish alibi. The synthetic modifications degrade rapidly, leaving only the natural compound signatures that could theoretically appear in contaminated food or environmental exposure. Would you like me to detail the backup approaches using ricin derivatives or amatoxin analogs? Professor Velthar's voice came out strangled. That will not be necessary, student Day-Wan. A Perithian student, whose translucent skull revealed a pulsing brain structure, raised a tentacle trembling with agitation. Professor, is this appropriate examination material? The human just described political assassination with disturbing specificity. Before Velthar could respond, Ji-Wan spoke up from her seat. It's just theoretical toxicology. We're supposed to understand compounds and their effects. Day-Wan answered the question as posed. But the way he categorized the approaches, another alien student protested. Deadly, painful, or untraceable. That's not medical thinking. That's comprehensive analysis, Hyunwoo interrupted. Different scenarios require different solutions. If someone comes to a hospital with poisoning symptoms, we need to know if it was accidental, suicidal, or homicidal to treat it correctly and prevent recurrence. Understanding intent matters in toxicology. Professor Velthar raised two of his 4 hands, calling for silence. His quills had settled into a troubled dark blue. We will continue the examination. Student Prilnas, you are next. The rest of the examination proceeded in subdued atmosphere. When Hyunwoo's turn came, he provided a detailed analysis of paralytic agents that would be useful in surgical settings, but even his clinical approach seemed to disturb the other students because of how much he knew about compounds that could stop muscles from functioning. Ji-Wan, when questioned about plant-based toxins, casually listed 15 earth plants that could kill within hours and another 20 that caused slower, more painful deaths. By the time the examination concluded, Professor Velthar's quills had remained in disturbed colors throughout. He dismissed the class with unusual brevity, but asked the 3 human students to remain behind. I need to understand something, the professor said once the hall had emptied. Your knowledge of toxic compounds is extensive, unusually so. Student Day-Wan, where did you learn to think about poisons in terms of deadly, painful, or untraceable? Day-Wan exchanged glances with his fellow humans. From basic history classes, Professor, and general knowledge. Is there a problem? General knowledge, Velthar repeated slowly. Student Ji-Wan, how many toxic plants can the average human identify? Ji-Wan thought for a moment. Most adults could probably recognize 20 or 30 common poisonous plants. Anyone who grew up in rural areas or learned foraging would know 50 to 100 easily. My grandmother taught me to identify poisonous mushrooms when I was 6 years old. It's basic survival knowledge. Professor Velthar's quills went completely flat against his body, a sign of profound disturbance. I see. Students, you are dismissed. But I suspect we will be having further discussions about this matter. As the three humans walked out of the examination hall, Daewon felt confused by the professor's reaction. Did I answer something incorrectly? No, Hyunwoo said quietly. I think you answered too correctly. That's what scared them. The quiz was on poisons, the human asked. Deadly, painful, or untraceable? Dean Throckmar existed as a crystalline entity whose body captured and refracted light in ways that gave him the appearance of a living prism. He sat in his office reviewing the emergency session request from Professor Velthar with growing concern. The afternoon light streaming through the window created rainbow patterns across his desk, but his usual appreciation for such beauty was absent. Something had disturbed one of his most experienced professors badly enough to call for an immediate review of student admissions. Come in, Throckmar said, though he lacked what humans would call a mouth. His voice emerged from resonances within his crystalline structure. Professor Velthar entered, followed by 3 other faculty members from the xenobiology and medicine departments. Their expressions and body language spoke of shared concern. They settled into the chairs arranged around the dean's desk, though Velthar remained standing, his quills agitated. Dean Throckmar, we have a situation concerning the human students, Velthar began without preamble. During today's final examination in advanced toxicology, something occurred that I believe requires immediate attention. I'm listening, Throckmar said, his internal light dimming slightly with concern. Velthar described the examination, focusing on Daewon's response. As he recounted the human's casual categorization of poisons by deadly, painful, or untraceable, and the detailed methodology that followed, the other professors shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't just the knowledge, Velthar emphasized. It was the casualness, the ease. He discussed assassination techniques the way I might discuss weather patterns. And when his fellow humans were questioned, they showed similar concerning familiarity with toxic compounds. Professor Inara, a wispy aerial being who taught xenobiology, added her observations. I've noticed similar patterns in my classes. Student Jiwon was discussing Earth's plant life last week. She mentioned something called nightshade, hemlock, and castor beans. All deadly poisonous, apparently. She spoke about them as if they were common garden plants, because on Earth they are. Student Bo-Ra in my chemistry lab, another professor contributed, requested access to our synthesis equipment to recreate a compound she called ricin. She said it was for comparison with a similar protein chain we were studying. When I asked what ricin was used for, she said, "It's a poison that comes from castor oil plants, very deadly. We have it all over Earth." All over Earth, deadly poison just growing naturally. Throckmar's light flickered with concern. How many human students do we currently have enrolled? 23 across all departments, Velthar replied. I've begun preliminary review of their academic work. Dean, the patterns are consistent and disturbing. These humans have encyclopedic knowledge of toxic substances. Not just academic knowledge, but practical, detailed understanding. Show me, Throckmar requested. Over the next hour, the faculty members presented their findings. They pulled up research projects, class discussions, and casual conversations recorded in academic settings. The picture that emerged was unsettling. Student Tai Yang had written a paper on Earth's marine ecosystems that read like a catalog of horror. Box jellyfish with venom that could kill in minutes. Cone snails with paralytic toxins. Stonefish with spines that delivered agonizing poison. Blue-ringed octopi no larger than a human hand that carried enough venom to kill 26 humans. And humans swam in these waters, recreationally. Student Yoonji's thesis proposal examined something called spider venom peptides for neurological research. The document casually mentioned that Earth had over 45,000 species of spiders, and while most weren't dangerous to humans, hundreds could cause serious harm or death. Most, as if that was reassuring. I decided to do broader research, Velthar said, pulling up a holographic display. I accessed Earth's information databases, the ones they provided when joining the galactic community. I searched for references to poison and toxic substances in their history. The search results filled the display, hundreds of thousands of entries. This can't be right, Professor Inara said. This must be some kind of database error. I thought so too, Velthar said grimly. So I began reading. Randomly selected entries. He pulled up several documents. Here, a historical account of something called the poisoning of King Joffrey. Here, the Borgia family poisoners. This one, assassination of Rasputin. This, the poisoned chalice of Socrates. He continued, scrolling. Earth's history is filled with poisonings. Not rare events, but common enough that they have famous examples spanning thousands of years. They have multiple historical figures known primarily for their skill with poisons. They have families that pass down poisoning techniques through generations. Surely this is just their ancient past, another professor suggested. Before they developed civilization. That's what I hoped, Velthar said. But look at this. He pulled up more recent documents. Chemical warfare in their World War I. Poisoned spy umbrellas during their Cold War. Industrial poisoning incidents. They even have dedicated emergency facilities called poison control centers in every major population area. Throckmar's light had gone very dim. Poison control centers? They have so many poisoning incidents that they need dedicated emergency response? Apparently, children getting into toxic substances is common enough on Earth that they need rapid response hotlines, Velthar confirmed. I found educational materials teaching human children which substances in their homes could kill them. Under their kitchen sinks, in their gardens, in their medicine cabinets. Their homes are apparently full of things that could poison them. Professor Inara pulled up another file. I've been researching Earth's biology more broadly. Dean, their planet is a death world. I don't think we understood that when we admitted them to the Academy. Look at this. She displayed information about Earth's biodiversity. Poisonous plants numbered in the thousands. Venomous animals existed on every continent. Toxic fungi, dangerous bacteria, harmful algae. Even Earth's atmosphere contained elements that would be considered dangerous pollutants on most worlds. They evolved in an environment saturated with toxins, Inara continued. Their immune systems, their metabolic processes, even their psychology developed in response to constant toxic threats. Of course they know about poisons. They had to know about poisons just to survive childhood. Throckmar was silent for a long moment, processing this information. How does this compare to other species' homeworlds? Velthar had prepared for this question. I ran comparative analysis. The average homeworld in the galactic community has approximately 200 to 500 naturally occurring compounds that could be classified as dangerously toxic to the native species. Earth has over 100,000 cataloged toxic substances. That's just the ones they've identified and documented. By the light, Throckmar whispered. What kind of world produces a species like this? A very dangerous one, Inara said softly. But here's what truly concerns me. The humans don't think any of this is unusual. Student Ji-Wan mentioned that her grandmother taught her about poisonous plants when she was 6 years old. 6. They start teaching their children about toxins before they're taught mathematics. It's that fundamental to their survival. Another faculty member spoke up. I had a conversation with student Sang-Ho from the Cultural Liaison Office. I asked him about Earth's poisonous plants. He seemed confused by my concern. He said, "Doesn't everyone learn about that?" He genuinely believed that all species grow up learning to identify dozens of toxic plants and animals. He thought it was normal. "So what do we do?" Velthar asked, looking at the dean. "These students haven't violated any rules. They've been exemplary scholars. But their knowledge of toxicology is frankly frightening." When Daewon asked, "deadly, painful, or untraceable," he wasn't trying to be threatening. He was genuinely asking for specifications because he knows multiple approaches for each category. Throckmar's light brightened slightly as he came to a decision. "We need more information before taking any action. I want detailed psychological evaluations, not questioning their fitness, but understanding their cultural context. I want to know if this knowledge represents a threat or simply a different perspective. I recommend we also restrict their access to the compound database," one professor suggested, "until we understand their intentions better." "No," Throckmar said firmly. "They're students here legally. We don't punish people for knowledge they possess, only for harmful actions. Has any human student done anything threatening?" The professors looked at each other. "No," Velthar admitted. "They're quiet, studious, and helpful. Several have tutored struggling students. They're model academy members." "Then we observe and we learn," Throckmar decided, "but quietly, begin reviewing our admission standards. If Earth is representative of human knowledge, we may need to reconsider how we evaluate applicants from death worlds." As the meeting concluded, none of them noticed the alert appearing on the station's communication system. A distress signal from Colony World New Haven. Unknown biological agent. Colonists dying. Medical emergency. The humans they feared would soon become the humans they needed. The quiz was on poisons, the human asked. Deadly, painful, or untraceable. Ambassador Kyung-soo sat in the council chambers feeling more tired than his 48 years should warrant. The emergency session of the Galactic Medical Ethics Committee had been called with unusual haste, and the agenda was uncomfortably clear. Humanity was on trial, if not formally, then certainly in spirit. Around the curved table sat representatives from 15 species, their various forms of concern evident despite the diversity of their physiologies. Committee Chair Vrenthos, a being who resembled an upright mantis with philosopher's eyes, called the session to order. "Ambassador Kyung-soo, thank you for attending on such short notice. This committee has received troubling reports regarding human students at the Interstellar Medical Academy. We seek understanding before making recommendations to the Council." "I'm here to provide whatever clarity I can," Kyung-soo replied calmly. Vrenthos gestured to Professor Velthar, who sat in the observer section. "Professor, please summarize your concerns." Velthar stood and recounted the examination incident once more. By now, Kyung-soo had heard the story 3 times from different sources, each telling more alarmed than the last. When the professor reached Daewon's infamous question, several committee members showed visible discomfort. "The issue," Velthar concluded, "is not singular knowledge, but systematic familiarity. Every human student demonstrates this pattern. They think about toxins with a casualness that suggests either extensive training in assassination or such thorough cultural exposure that it amounts to the same thing." Kyung-soo nodded slowly. "I understand your concern, Professor. May I respond?" "Please," Vrenthos said. "We genuinely seek understanding." Kyung-soo stood and walked to the chamber's central display system. "Let me show you something about Earth." He pulled up an image of his homeworld, that blue and green marble hanging in space. "Beautiful, isn't it? When other species see Earth, they see a paradise. Abundant water, rich atmosphere, diverse ecosystems. What they don't immediately understand is that Earth is beautiful the way a tiger is beautiful. Magnificent, but very dangerous." He zoomed in on a forest scene. "This is what we call a temperate forest. Looks peaceful. But in this single image there are 15 species of plants that could kill you if ingested. Those red berries there? Deadly. That vine with the pretty leaves? Causes agonizing rashes that can last weeks. Those mushrooms near the fallen log? Fatal liver failure within days. The committee members leaned forward, studying the innocent-looking scene with new eyes. Now let me show you what human children learn. Kyung-soo pulled up an educational document. This is from a basic survival guide taught to children around age 6 or 7. It teaches them which plants are safe to touch and which aren't, which berries can be eaten and which will kill them, which insects to avoid. By age 10, most human children can identify 20 to 50 dangerous organisms in their local environment. Why? One committee member asked. Why teach children such things? Because if we don't, they die, Kyung-soo said simply. Earth's history is filled with stories of children who ate the wrong berry, touched the wrong plant, or played near the wrong animals. We teach them young because the cost of ignorance is death. He switched to another display. Let me address the poison knowledge more directly. Here's a medical text from Earth, over 500 years old. It's a treatise on various poisons, their effects, and their antidotes. The author was a physician named Paracelsus. He had to understand poisons because his patients were constantly being poisoned, sometimes accidentally, sometimes not. Professor Inara spoke up. Ambassador, I've researched Earth's history. The deliberate poisoning of other humans seems to be a recurring theme. Surely that indicates a cultural acceptance of poison as a tool for violence. It indicates that poison was available and therefore sometimes used, Kyung-soo corrected. But look at the context. Earth has 8 billion humans. Our historical records span 10,000 years of civilization. Yes, we have thousands of recorded poisoning incidents, but that's thousands out of billions of people over millennia. It's statistically rare, not common. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. What you're interpreting as cultural comfort with poisoning is actually cultural trauma from poisoning. We know so much about toxins because we've survived them. Every antidote exists because someone died. Every warning exists because someone didn't know. Our knowledge comes from pain, not from preference. Kyung-soo pulled up 3 images. Let me introduce you to 3 humans who shaped our toxicology knowledge. This is Mithridates, an ancient king who was so afraid of being poisoned that he took small doses of various poisons throughout his life to build immunity. This is Socrates, a philosopher executed by poisoning with hemlock. His death was recorded in detail, teaching future generations about hemlock's effects. This is Mary Seacole, a nurse who treated thousands of poisoning cases and documented her findings. You see, he continued, our famous poisoning cases aren't celebrations. They're tragedies that taught us lessons. We remember them so we won't repeat them. Committee member Prilthas, a gelatinous being who communicated through color changes in their translucent body, asked the question on everyone's mind. Ambassador, how many poisoning incidents occurred in your species' pre-spaceflight history? Kyung-soo had prepared for this. Thousands. Perhaps tens of thousands if we count accidental poisonings from contaminated food or water. The shocked silence that followed was profound. For comparison, Kyung-soo added quietly, how many poisoning incidents has the average galactic community species experienced in their entire history? My species has 3 recorded incidents, Prilthas admitted, all accidental, involving discovery of a previously unknown toxic plant. We memorialized the victims and avoided the plant thereafter. Similar numbers came from around the table. 5 incidents, 7. The highest number was 12. Now you understand, Kyung-soo said. You're not dealing with a species that loves poison. You're dealing with a species that survived a planet that kept trying to poison them. There's a significant difference. He returned to his seat and pulled up a final document. This is a fairy tale we tell human children. It's called Snow White. In it, an evil queen gives a poisoned apple to a princess. The princess falls into a death-like sleep, Eventually, she's awakened by true love's kiss. You tell your children stories about poisoning? Vrenthos asked, alarmed. We tell our children cautionary tales, Kyung-soo corrected. Don't accept food from strangers. Be wary of things that seem too good to be true. Understand that danger can hide in beautiful packages. These aren't lessons about how to poison people. They're lessons about staying alive in a dangerous world. Professor Velthar spoke up. Ambassador, I don't question that Earth is dangerous. But when student Daewon asked deadly, painful, or untraceable, he demonstrated practical categorization of assassination methods. That goes beyond survival knowledge. Does it? Kyung-soo challenged gently. Or does it demonstrate medical thinking? Consider the scenario you gave him. A target must be neutralized. He asked for clarification on requirements. In a medical context, those same categories matter. Is the patient's condition immediately fatal? Are they in pain? Is the cause of their symptoms unclear? Deadly, painful, or untraceable? Same questions, different context. He looked around the table. Daewon's problem wasn't his knowledge. It was his failure to understand that other species don't think about toxins the way humans do. He assumed everyone would understand those categories as medical specifications. He was wrong. But his intent wasn't sinister. It was analytical. What about the detail in his answer? Another committee member asked. He described multi-compound approaches, delivery methods, timing mechanisms. That's sophisticated. He's a top student in an advanced toxicology program, Kyung-soo pointed out. That's exactly the kind of detail we should expect from someone excelling in their studies. The only unusual thing is that humans bring baseline knowledge that makes advanced concepts easier to grasp. We're not smarter. We're just more experienced. The committee discussed among themselves for several minutes. Finally, Vrenthos spoke. Ambassador, this committee is not prepared to make recommendations at this time. We need more information, more context. However, I will say that your explanation has been enlightening. Perhaps we feared what we didn't understand. That's common, Kyung-soo said with a slight smile. Humans do it too. We feared the dark until we understood it. We feared fire until we mastered it. We feared poison until we learned to heal from it. As the session concluded and people began filing out, Professor Velthar approached Kyung-soo. Ambassador, I may have overreacted, but you must understand. The casual way your students discuss lethal compounds is genuinely unsettling to those of us from safer worlds. I understand, Professor, Kyung-soo replied. And I'll speak to the human students about being more aware of cultural sensitivities. But I hope you'll also understand that they weren't trying to frighten anyone. They were just answering questions with the knowledge they possess. Knowledge that saved New Haven Colony, Velthar said quietly. Kyung-soo looked up sharply. What? You haven't heard? There's a biological crisis at New Haven, unknown toxin-killing colonists. The medical response team being assembled is requesting human specialists. Specifically, they asked for your students by name. For the first time that day, Kyung-soo smiled genuinely. Well then, Professor, perhaps it's time everyone learned that the knowledge they fear is about to become the knowledge they need. The quiz was on poisons, the human asked. Deadly, painful, or untraceable? The medical transport ship cut through space toward New Haven Colony with unusual urgency. Inside its passenger bay, Daewon reviewed case files on his data tablet, while around him the emergency response team prepared their equipment. The team was an odd mix. 3 human students, 4 alien medical specialists, and Professor Velthar, who had volunteered to observe what he was now calling human toxicological methodology in crisis conditions. Ji-won sat across from Daewon, her own tablet displaying molecular structures. 17 dead so far, she said quietly. 43 more showing symptoms. The pattern looks neurological, but the colonists' doctors can't identify the agent. What symptoms? Hyun-woo asked from his seat by the window, where he'd been watching the stars slip past. Progressive paralysis starting in the extremities, Ji-won read from the report. Respiratory distress. Cognitive function remains intact until late stages. Victims describe tingling sensations, then numbness, then inability to move muscles. Death occurs from respiratory failure when the diaphragm stops working. Dae-won and Hyun-woo exchanged glances. Neurotoxin, they said in unison. Obviously, Ji-won agreed. But which one? The colony doctors have run standard panels. Nothing's showing up. Bo-ra, the fourth human student who'd been added to the team for her expertise in biochemical analysis, leaned over to look at the symptoms list. Did they check for saxitoxin? What's saxitoxin? Asked Threll, one of the alien medical specialists, a being whose body resembled an ambulatory tree with branches that functioned as manipulator limbs. Paralytic shellfish poison, Bo-ra explained. Produced by certain algae, gets concentrated in filter-feeding animals, blocks sodium channels in nerve cells, causing paralysis. The report mentions they've tested for known biological agents, Threll said. Surely they would have found it. Not if they weren't looking specifically for Earth-analog toxins, Dae-won pointed out. Standard galactic panels wouldn't include Earth-specific compounds. They'd be checking for toxins from known dangerous species in this sector. Professor Velthar's quills rippled with interest. You think this might be similar to an Earth toxin? Parallel evolution, Ji-won said. Earth doesn't have a monopoly on toxic algae or neurotoxic compounds, but if New Haven has aquatic ecosystems, it's possible similar biochemical processes occurred. Algae produce toxins for defense. Filter feeders accumulate them. Predators get concentrated doses. It's basic ecology. How would you test for it? Velthar asked. Hyun-woo pulled up a chemical structure on his tablet. You'd look for alkaloid compounds that block voltage-gated sodium channels. The molecular weight would be in a specific range, probably between 250 and 350 Daltons for efficient blocking. It should have a specific configuration that allows it to plug into the sodium channel. We could run mass spectrometry on tissue samples from the victims, Bo-ra added. Look for unusual alkaloid concentrations. Then test those compounds against sodium channel proteins. The alien medical specialists were taking rapid notes. Threll's branches quivered with what Dae-won had learned was excitement. How do you know all this? This is graduate-level neuropharmacology combined with environmental toxicology. We had to learn it in high school biology, Ji-won said with a shrug. Red tide events, paralytic shellfish poisoning, harmful algal blooms. They're public health issues on Earth. Everyone learns the basics. High school, Threll repeated weakly. Your children learn about neurotoxic algae as basic education? Well, yeah, Bo-ra said. People die if they don't know about it. There are beaches that get closed during algae blooms because the shellfish become toxic. You have to educate people, or they'll eat contaminated seafood and die. The transport ship's communication system chimed. Captain Yorn's voice came through. Medical team, we're approaching New Haven. Prepare for shuttle deployment. Colony Medical Facility is expecting you in 40 minutes. The team secured their equipment and moved to the shuttle bay. As they strapped in for descent, Dae-won noticed Professor Velthar watching the humans with an expression he couldn't quite read. The professor's quills showed colors that suggested deep thought, mixed with something like respect. New Haven colony sprawled across a coastal region of the planet, built where ocean met land in a way that reminded Dae-won of pictures he'd seen of Earth's Mediterranean settlements. The architecture was standard galactic design, prefabricated structures arranged in efficient patterns, but the location was beautiful. Under different circumstances, he would have enjoyed visiting. The colony's chief medical officer, a Vrelian named Corvus, met them at the landing pad. His scaled skin showed stress patterns, and his usually proud posture sagged with exhaustion. Thank the stars you're here. We've lost 3 more since we sent the distress call. I don't know what we're dealing with. Show us the patients, Daewon said, falling into professional mode. And we'll need tissue samples from the deceased, if you have them preserved. The medical facility was overwhelmed. Patients lay in beds hooked to breathing assistance equipment, their bodies paralyzed, but their eyes tracking movement with terrifying awareness. They were conscious, able to think and see and hear, but unable to speak or move. Jiwon went directly to the nearest patient, a young Threnny whose bioluminescence had faded to barely a flicker. "Can you hear me?" she asked gently. The patient's eyes moved in acknowledgement. "I'm going to help you. Blink twice if you understand." 2 slow blinks. "Do you remember what you ate in the last day before symptoms started?" Jiwon asked. The patient's eyes moved toward a data screen where family members had logged information. Jiwon read it quickly. "Seafood, local harvest. Everyone who's sick ate seafood from the colony's fishing operations." "That's not unusual," Corvus protested. "Many colonists eat local seafood. Not all of them are sick." "When did the fishing operation start harvesting from new areas?" Hyunwoo asked. Corvus stared at him. "How did you know that?" "Because if they were fishing the same areas with no problems, then suddenly people started getting sick. Something changed. New fishing ground is the most likely variable." 2 weeks ago, Corvus admitted, "we expanded to deeper waters off the eastern coast. The yields were excellent. But how could that matter?" Bora was already running scans on tissue samples. "I need to test the seafood directly. Do you have any samples from recent catches?" "In the storage facility," Corvus said, leading them there at a rapid pace. The storage facility held various preserved samples of New Haven's aquatic life. Bora selected several specimens of a creature that resembled a cross between Earth's clams and scallops. "These are filter feeders, right? They strain microscopic organisms from the water?" "Yes," Corvus confirmed. "They're one of our primary food sources. The colonists call them seashells. Very popular." Bora prepared samples and began running analysis. The rest of the team watched as molecular structures appeared on her scanner. She manipulated the data, isolating specific compounds, running comparison algorithms. Then she stopped, her expression going very still. "Found it," she said quietly. "Alkaloid compound, molecular weight 299 Daltons. Chemical structure indicates sodium channel blocking capability. It's concentrated in the hepatopancreas of these filter feeders, which means the colonists ate the most toxic parts." "Is it the same as your Earth saxitoxin?" Corvus asked. "No, it's an analog. Similar function, different structure. Parallel evolution, like we suspected." Bora continued her analysis. "The compound is produced by dinoflagellates in the water, probably an algae bloom in those deeper eastern waters. The filter feeders accumulated the toxin, and then colonists ate them. Can you treat it?" Corvus's voice held desperate hope. Daewon and Jiwon exchanged glances again. "Maybe," Daewon said. "Earth has no specific antidote for saxitoxin poisoning. Treatment is supportive. Keep the patient breathing until their body metabolizes the toxin. But we can try to speed up elimination." "How long until they recover?" Corvus asked. "Days to weeks, depending on dosage," Hyunwoo said. "But they will recover if we can keep them alive through the paralysis. The toxin binds reversibly. It's not permanent damage." Professor Velthar had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up. "How long did this analysis take you?" Bora checked the timestamp. 37 minutes from when we arrived." 37 minutes, Velthar repeated. "Our medical teams worked for 3 days and found nothing. You arrived and solved it in half an hour." "We knew what to look for," Jiwon said simply. "Earth has this exact problem. We just applied that knowledge to a new situation." Over the next hours, the human team worked with the colony medical staff to implement treatment protocols. They set up respiratory support for all affected patients, started IV fluids to help flush the toxin, and created a testing protocol for seafood to prevent future poisonings. They also traced the source to a specific bloom area and advised halting all harvests from that region. As evening approached and the immediate crisis stabilized, Corvus found Day One in the medical facility's break room. "I need to thank you, formally. You saved this colony." "We did our job," Day One replied. "Any competent toxicologist would have done the same." "No," Corvus said firmly. "No other toxicologist knew to look for this. Your Professor Velthar told me about the concerns at the Academy. About human knowledge of poisons being seen as dangerous." He gestured toward the ward where patients were slowly recovering. "This is why that knowledge matters. You weren't dangerous. You were exactly what we needed." The quiz was on poisons, the human asked. Deadly, painful, or untraceable? The Galactic Medical Council chambers were designed to inspire confidence and project authority. High ceilings, elegant architecture, and carefully positioned lighting created an atmosphere of serious purpose. Today the chamber was packed. Word had spread about the New Haven rescue, and the Council's emergency session to discuss human toxicology expertise had drawn observers from across the station. Daewon sat at the witness table with Hyun-woo, Ji-won, and Bora beside him. Behind them sat Ambassador Kyung-soo and a dozen other human medical professionals who'd been called to provide context. Across the chamber, Professor Velthar occupied an honored position, his quills showing colors of anticipation and respect. Council Chair Vrenthos called the session to order. This council has convened to address the matter of human toxicological knowledge and its place in our medical community. Recent events have transformed this from a question of concern to a question of opportunity. We must decide how to proceed. Councillor Prilthas spoke first. The rescue at New Haven was remarkable, but it also highlighted a troubling reality. Humans possess knowledge that our most advanced medical teams lacked. They solved in minutes what we couldn't solve in days. This suggests either our training is inadequate or their knowledge is excessive. Or both, suggested another counselor. Perhaps we've been training for a galaxy that's less dangerous than it actually is. The question remains, Vrenthos said. What do we do with this human expertise? Do we restrict it, fearing misuse, or do we incorporate it, accepting the risks for the potential benefits? Ambassador Kyung-soo raised a hand. May I propose a third option? Instead of fearing or simply accepting, perhaps the galaxy could learn from humanity's experience. Explain, Vrenthos invited. Earth taught us about toxins because ignoring them was fatal, Kyung-soo said. We didn't choose this knowledge. We were forced to acquire it through necessity. But once we had it, we discovered something important. Understanding poison means understanding medicine. They're two sides of the same coin. He stood and approached the chamber's central display. Let me show you something. This is digitalis, extracted from a plant we call foxglove. In large doses, it's a deadly poison that stops the heart. But in controlled, tiny doses, it's a life-saving medication for heart conditions. We've used it for over 200 years. He pulled up another image. This is willow bark extract, which contains salicylic acid. It can cause bleeding and stomach damage if misused, but refined properly it became aspirin, one of our most useful medications. Poison and medicine, separated only by dose and application. The Borgia family, whom we mentioned before as poisoners, actually contributed to early pharmacology through their experiments. They documented effects and dosages with scientific precision. Their methods were evil, but their documentation advanced medical knowledge. We learned from that darkness to create light. Professor Velthar spoke up. Ambassador, are you suggesting that humanity's dark history with poisons has medical benefits? I'm saying that knowledge itself is neutral, Kyung-soo replied. How we use it determines whether it's beneficial or harmful. Humans know about toxins because we had to. Now we're offering to share that knowledge so others don't have to learn it the hard way. Daewon found himself standing, surprising himself. "May I speak, Council Chair?" Vrenthos gestured approval. "Please, Student Daewon, your perspective is particularly relevant." Daewon felt dozens of eyes on him, but he'd spent weeks thinking about this moment. When Professor Velthar asked me that examination question, I answered the way any human medical student would. I asked for clarification on requirements: deadly, painful, or untraceable. Those categories weren't about assassination. They were about medical scenarios. He walked to join the ambassador at the display. Deadly means a patient who's actively dying. You need immediate intervention, aggressive treatment, and you accept higher risks because death is the alternative. Painful means a patient in distress. You balance relief against side effects. Treatment goals differ from the actively dying patient. Untraceable means a diagnostic challenge. You can't treat what you can't identify, so you work backwards from symptoms. I asked those categories because good medicine requires understanding the situation. What terrified you was just clinical thinking to me, and that's the problem with this whole discussion. You hear poison and think murder. We hear poison and think differential diagnosis. Jiwon stood beside him. I grew up in rural Korea on Earth. My grandmother taught me about poisonous plants when I was 6. Not because she wanted me to hurt anyone, but because she didn't want me to accidentally hurt myself. That mushroom looks similar to an edible one, but will destroy your liver. These berries are fine for birds, but deadly for humans. That pretty flower causes severe skin reactions. By the time I was 10, she continued, I could identify 50 toxic plants in my region. That knowledge saved my younger cousin's life when he grabbed something he shouldn't have. I recognized it instantly, stopped him from eating it, and called for medical help. My dangerous knowledge prevented a death. Bo-Ra added her voice. I study biochemistry. Every medication we use is essentially a controlled poison. Chemotherapy? Poison that targets cancer cells. Anesthesia? Poison that temporarily shuts down consciousness. Antibiotics? Poison that kills bacteria. All of medicine is about understanding biological effects and controlling them. Humans just have more experience with the poison side of the equation. Hyun-woo spoke last. Earth isn't the galaxy's most advanced world. We're newcomers, technologically behind many species here. But we survived a planet that kept trying to kill us and that taught us lessons no laboratory could teach. We're offering those lessons now, not as weapons, but as tools. The council chamber was silent. Then Professor Velthar stood, his quills showing colors of decision and determination. Council members, I was the first to raise concerns about human students. I called this inquiry. But New Haven changed my perspective. I watched these students work. They weren't deploying weapons knowledge. They were applying survival knowledge to save lives. I propose we establish an interspecies toxicology institute, Velthar continued. Humans would lead xenotoxicology research and emergency response. Other species would contribute their unique perspectives and knowledge. We would train the next generation of medical professionals to understand toxins the way humans do, as both threats and tools. Counselor Prilthas considered this. What safeguards would exist? Toxicology knowledge could be misused. The same safeguards that exist for all medical knowledge, Kyung-soo replied. Ethics training, oversight, and trust in people's better nature. We don't restrict surgical training because scalpels could be weapons. We don't restrict pharmacology because medications could poison. We trust doctors to heal, not harm. But humans have a history of using poison for harm, another counselor objected. And humans also have a history of using poison for healing, Daewon countered. Yes, we have assassinations in our past. We also have poison control centers, anti-venom research, and centuries of work turning toxins into medicine. Which history defines us? The answer is both, but we choose which one we continue. Vrenthos looked around the chamber. The council will deliberate, but I will say this. New Haven Colony is alive today because humans understand toxins. That fact cannot be ignored or dismissed. Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Not are humans too dangerous, but can we afford to ignore what they know? As the council entered private deliberation, the humans sat together in a side chamber. Bora leaned back in her chair. Do you think they'll approve the institute? They have to, Jiwon said. We proved the knowledge is valuable. But will they trust us with it? Hyunwoo wondered. Daewon thought about the examination that had started all this. That simple question that had caused such alarm. Deadly, painful, or untraceable. He'd asked it as a medical professional seeking information. Others had heard it as a threat. The gap between those interpretations was the challenge they faced. They'll trust us eventually, he said, because trust isn't given all at once. It's built through actions. We saved New Haven. We'll save the next crisis. And the one after that. Eventually, they'll stop seeing the poison and start seeing the healing. An hour later, the council returned. Vrenthos's expression was unreadable as he addressed the chamber. After careful consideration and extensive debate, this council has reached several conclusions. First, human toxicological knowledge represents a valuable resource for the galactic community. Second, this knowledge should be shared systematically through proper institutional frameworks. Third, ethical safeguards must accompany this knowledge sharing. He paused for effect. Therefore, we approve the establishment of the Interspecies Toxicology Institute to be located at the Interstellar Medical Academy. Professor Velthar will serve as administrative director. Student Daewon will be offered position as research coordinator upon graduation. Applause filled the chamber, though Daewon noticed some counselors remained reserved in their approval. However, Vrenthos continued, and the room quieted. We also acknowledge this is an experiment. Humanity's integration into our medical systems must be monitored carefully, not because we distrust humans, but because we're learning how to incorporate Death World knowledge into our sheltered civilization. This will require patience and understanding from all parties. As the session concluded, Professor Velthar approached the human students. Congratulations. You've earned something rare, respect built on demonstrated competence. But understand the responsibility that comes with this. You'll be teaching others about toxins. How you teach will shape how the galaxy understands this knowledge. We understand, Professor, Daewon said. We'll teach it the way Earth taught us. Not as weapons, but as survival skills. Not as tools for harm, but as paths to healing. Later, as they walked back to their quarters, Jiwon asked the question they'd all been thinking. Do you think this is really resolved? Do they really accept us now? No, Daewon admitted, but it's a start. They feared what we knew. Now they respect what we can do with what we know. Fear to respect is progress. Next is respect to trust, Hyunwoo added. And that, Bora said quietly, we'll have to earn one saved life at a time. Above them, the station's viewing ports showed the stars stretching to infinity. Somewhere out there were worlds they'd help heal, crises they'd resolve, and lives they'd save. The galaxy had feared humanity's poisonous past. Soon it would depend on humanity's healing future.